Hello and welcome to the Existential Stoic Podcast, episode 14. I am Danny. I'm here with Randy.
Hey, Danny.
Hey, Randy. And today we're going to talk about how to start something.
Something?
Something.
Okay.
Anything in
What
general.
are we starting?
I don't know. Which should we start?
Yeah, anything.
Anything?
Yeah, but it seems like a good topic because a lot of people want to get started doing something, but they just don't.
Yeah.
Procrastination.
Procrastination, right? We all struggle with it. And also we have the new year coming up. And, a lot of people are going to be making New Year's resolutions to
What
start.
a waste of freaking time.
I know, right? To start all these different things in the new year. And so hopefully maybe this will help, right? And think differently about it. I mean, I don't know about...
We should definitely talk about New Year's resolutions because, my opinion, they're just an absolute load of crap.
We're talking about starting, so you want to? Okay.
Yeah, let's, please.
Why do you think they're crap?
I think there's such a waste because there's almost the expectation that you're not going to do them. Like, everybody asks, "Ooh, what are your New Year's resolutions? What are your New Year's resolutions?" And everybody knows that within a week, you drop them. Like, everybody goes to the gym real hard for a week, and then they stop. And they go on a diet real hard for a week, and then they stop. And all this other stuff, there's the expectation that you're going to drop them. And when you go in to any project with the belief that you're not going to do it, you're not going to do it.
Yeah, when you go in with the belief you're going to fail, you're never going to complete it or stick to it, right?
Yeah. And
go ahead.
And I also think it's so ridiculous that you have to wait until the first of the year to start something new. Like, I'm such an activationist that, like, anytime I have this philosophy that I'm impatient with action and patient with results. Like, literally anytime I have an idea that I want to do, I do it.
Well, you should, right? We should always be starting those ideas that we have, those projects, because I think that's the right way. You're doing things to find out what's going to work for you and what's right. Not everything's going to work, but as long as you're starting them, you're doing the big part, right? You're trying it out. You're willing to try things out.
So what are your New Year's resolutions?
Well, let me say this, right? Yeah. Let me say this. I kind of agree with you. I think there is a lot of expectation of failure. And so to that extent, New Year's resolutions can be kind of like pointless or an exercise in futility that actually makes you more upset in the long run. I guess I kind of understand maybe that, like, it's the idea of it's a new year. People use that idea of a fresh start and they want to change themselves. So that it's a motivation to make the change. And if that's the case, I think that's great. Because I know it is hard to change yourself sometimes. If you're really struggling, it's very difficult to make changes. But I think to that extent, your New Year's resolution should be more focused, few, and things you're really going to stick to. Like, not like, because you hear people say, like, I'm going to diet, exercise, meditate, do yoga, all these things.
I'm going to be
really,
a millionaire this year. I'm going to do that. Yeah.
It just doesn't work out. I think, if you're going to make New Year's resolutions, make them privately. Don't announce them to the world. And make it something you really want to commit to.
Yeah, I've always found it's useful to be up to no more than 3 things at once. Because any more than that, and you're so torn apart in different directions, you can't really focus on one. Ideally, only focusing on one thing at a time and doing it so often that it becomes a habit. And then once that becomes a habit, then you can go out and do something else.
Incorporate other things. Yeah, no, it's a good philosophy, right? Because when you're first doing it, it's going to be more time consuming. You're going to struggle with it. But once you become practiced at it and it becomes a habit, you become skilled at whatever it is, right? Whether it's, writing, work, whatever, exercising, it becomes part of your routine. It's less of a struggle. You can add new things. I think that's a good point. Yeah.
So, talking about New Year's resolutions and the belief that they never work, I think belief is very important because going in to do anything, and we're talking about how to start something.
Yeah.
So since we're doing something, you obviously have to have a belief that you can succeed in it, or at least work on cultivating that belief. Because the human mind is pretty crazy. Like, I heard this thing where someone was saying, imagine you, God forbid, were in a coma, and you woke up out of that coma, and somebody said to you, you're a Navy SEAL. Don't you think you would act and do things differently than if you woke up from that coma and somebody said you're a piano teacher?
Huh. That's an interesting thought experiment.
Yeah, and so it's this idea of belief. Like, people, you actually have to believe that whatever that thing that you want is within the realm of possibility and totally possible for you, because inside your brain there's the reticular activating system and it looks for exactly what you believe is true. So once you believe that, then it's true, then there's no way you can't do it. It's a law, like the law of gravity. You drop something off a building, it falls.
Yeah, no.
Once you believe something's possible for you, then it's actually possible, and you can go ahead and achieve it.
No, I think that's a great place to start, right? Because if we believe that, if we're negative, pessimistic, if we believe we're going to fail, we will fail. Or we won't start, right? That fear will prevent us from even starting something. And I think belief's a great place to start, because really you have to believe you're capable of doing things. And what are some ways that you help yourself or remind yourself of that fact, I guess? That you can do something to cultivate that belief.
One of the best ways I do it is I just look back at my own history, my past, and I see instances of when I wanted something and then I believed I could do it and I worked towards it and then I had it. Like I look back on my past and I see all these instances that it's almost guaranteed, like almost 100% possibility that if there's something I want and I believe I can have it, then I can have it.
Yeah, you'll put the work in and you'll do it, right?
Yeah.
And you'll accomplish it. And I think that's, looking at your past is a great one, right? Looking back and seeing times when you have succeeded, you tried something new, you did it, you put your mind to it, you set yourself a project and you completed it. Because that shows that you're capable of doing it, right?
Yeah.
And doing new things. I think one of my favorites is I also remind myself too that we are all people. There is no, there are, don't get me wrong, there's exceptions like Beethoven or Mozart and stuff like that, or,
But really they're not exceptions
yeah.
because they put in the work.
Yeah, exactly. They put in tons of work.
Tens of thousands of hours behind a piano. There's a reason why they were
Einstein thought about science all the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, everything he saw in life, he was thinking about how it worked and how to describe it and how to understand it. So it's not like they just all of a sudden it came out of the blue, right?
Yeah.
But I think reminding yourself that everyone is a person is important, that there's no, everyone puts time in. They put the work in and that's how they get it done. And that means it's possible for you to do it too, right?
Yeah.
It's not out of our reach.
Yeah, it's like Lincoln said, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yeah.
Everybody's waiting for this luck. Like all of a sudden, $10,000 will drop out of the air, or all of a sudden they'll design the next coolest thing. But they say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I was thinking the other day that the road to mediocrity is paved with good ideas.
Yeah, that are not executed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's got good ideas. I mean, I have this
literally,
I have this one friend who he's always talking about how he had this idea and somebody else did it and became a millionaire. He had this idea, somebody else did it, became a millionaire. I was like, well, what have you... And he actually got into a fight with his family because he had this idea, he shared it with them, they actually did it and made money off of it.
Really?
And he became very angry because they stole his idea. And I was like, an idea is worthless. They're a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
People have ideas all the time.
And there's plenty of good ideas.
Yeah. A well-executed bad idea will make you a lot more money and will make you a lot happier than than non-execution of a great idea.
Not to mention too, once you take any idea and put it into practice and execute it, you also refine it. It's not like you stick exactly to the original plan, right? So it becomes better over time. That's how, business starts. That's how everything starts and does well, right?
Yeah.
You figure things out as you go. It's funny, like, literally that's true for every project almost, right? It's interesting, this idea too of like that idea of having ideas but not doing anything with them. I think that's an important one because so many people struggle with that. Or, like you said too, expecting like, your problem to be solved by like luck or chance or the world, right? Looking like, expecting your parents, the government, somebody else to solve the problem for you, or expecting like, you're going to get a lottery ticket and win millions. Like that is basically, I think of that as losing yourself, right? You're putting your fate in the hands of a world that doesn't care about you. And so you have no really like no action. You're not doing anything positive, right?
There's nothing that you did.
Damn, that was the word I was thinking of. Agency. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, everybody wants to make money, but what they don't realize is the only people who make money work in a mint. The rest of us have to earn money. And the thing is, you earn money by providing a useful service. Like, if you focus solely on the service you provide, and you do the best you can with providing a service, the money will take care of itself. You don't need to worry about that because you serve enough people, you're going to get paid.
Yeah, you hear that said a lot too, and I think a lot of that too is perseverance, right? Like people, they have this idea in their head that they'll start something and there'll be an immediate payoff and a huge bankroll, almost instantaneously, right? But you look at most good ideas, most good projects, they take a while to execute. And the people that really do succeed are the ones that stick with it. And eventually it does pay off.
Yeah.
Because they've found a niche for themselves. They found what works. And they have a good model that works over time. But, expecting really good results really quickly will also be problematic, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just look at it. Amazon, they're crushing it right now. But they didn't get here overnight. It's 30, 40 years of work that actually got them here. And in the beginning, they were a bookstore.
Yeah.
They're not crushing it as a bookstore right now.
No, they're really not.
No plan will surpass confrontation with its first enemy, something like that. But
yeah,
basically, like if you have
whatever the hell that means.
If you have an idea, once you start executing it, you realize it doesn't work, and then you have to shift, you have to change, you have to do something different.
Well, yeah, you have to adapt it to what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So let's I don't know. It's funny when I think about starting things too. I've struggled with this in my own life. I know you have as well, right? What are the main fears you faced in your own sort of attempts to start things?
Well, usually it's two fears. One is the fear of failure, that I will fail, and two is the fear of success, that it'll take off and I won't be able to handle it. And those are I think both of those are associated with the fear of death, which is this like uncomfortable confrontation of the unknown.
Yeah.
And they both are they're kind of crippling because you're like, oh, I have to try stuff that I don't know.
Well, it's interesting too, right? Because both of those also highlight the idea of the uncertainty and our fear of uncertainty, right? That we know, even if our situation, I mean, a lot of people have talked about this, even if we know our situation is bad now, we know it. And it's funny, but reason kind of likes, our rational part of ourselves likes things to be the same. It likes to feel secure and know. And even a bad situation can be comfortable in the sense that you know what to expect. The unknown, those uncertainties, they cause fear. And it's funny that you mentioned like the fear of failure and the fear of success, because I think those are one that haunt a lot of people. Both of those, because they're really big uncertainties, right? Mm-hmm. If you try and you fail, well, you failed, and we've been taught our whole lives that we should never fail. And if it blows up, how do you handle that then? And how do you deal with a new life?
Yeah, it's a really tough indoctrination that you have to deal with in order to start anything. Because from kindergarten all the way up until you drop out of school or graduate out of high school or college, you're taught that failure is bad.
Yeah.
Being wrong is bad. And that's simply not the case in real life.
You're also taught, right, doing new things is bad. Yeah. You need to do kind of the old stuff over and over again.
Yeah. You're taught you can't go against authority, that you have to follow the rules. And the thing is, you don't get to new places by following the rules.
No.
Yeah. One of the reasons that Einstein was so successful is because he bucked the rules. He didn't care.
It's interesting. I always wonder in his case, too, because he was working in a patent office, right? Mm-hmm. When he wrote those initial papers that were groundbreaking. I always wonder if he had, because he wasn't accepted to grad school, if he had been accepted to grad school, something else would have happened because he would have been in the university system.
Yep.
And, those expectations there to pass and to succeed often come with, doing the old style, right, over and over again.
Yeah, well, I read this thing the other day that was saying that when he was young and he was learning violin, he had this teacher who just taught him scales and wouldn't let him do anything else. And so on his own, he got his hands on like some Mozart sonatas, and he learned them, and that was like breaking the rules, going against authority, thinking outside the box. Because he was brought up in this very structured system, and he on his own went outside of the box. And because he did that, at the same time that he published his papers on the theory of relativity, there were 2 or 3 other scientists who were publishing the same thing. And the theory of relativity could have been taken from any of their papers, but they were too afraid to go against the system.
Yeah, too afraid to go against the grain, right?
Yep.
To do something different and really, fight the norms that are holding us back. And that's true, man. In so many things I found that out, right? That you have to be yourself. You have to be willing to be true to yourself and kind of do something different. Otherwise, there's no innovation. Yeah. And we're all kind of trapped by this.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing to be stuck with.
Yeah, so we talk about kind of bucking the system. I like that. I'm always a fan of that.
Yeah.
Because, if you're, what do they say? If you're like, if you're following everybody else, you're probably doing it wrong. But, so we talk about belief, how that's important. We talk about being true to yourself. I also think transforming whatever we want into a habit. I think that's such an important thing, because Aristotle, he says we're all products of our habits.
Yes.
And basically, whatever habits you have, that's who you become, because you just do it on a regular basis. So when I started a business, I wanted to figure out what habits do I have to do in order to be successful. And so when I started a YouTube channel, I knew I needed to create videos. So I made it a habit to make a video every day. And now, 3 years later, I've made over 1,000 videos, have over 100,000 subscribers, and it's a successful business, but it's a successful business because I started with an easy habit that I could do every day.
Yeah, I think any successful thing is really built around that. It makes sense, right? It's figuring out what is it that I want and figuring out what habits can I incorporate into my day that will make that a reality. Mm-hmm. You know, I think with writing, like I always find that like I make it a habit to write every day, sometimes a certain amount or a certain piece, and that keeps me doing it and keeps me sort of fresh. And I think with creativity, you get more creativity. You kind of like, you get that machine going, and once you do it, it just perpetuates itself.
They actually said this at an NFL game yesterday, and I was
really
blown away. Yeah, because he was talking about quality time with your children, and how people are so concerned about spending quality time with their children, and then they go to spend this quality time with their children, and they get completely frustrated and can't stand them and want them to get rid of them. But instead, he said, what's more important is to spend quantity time with your children, because if you spend the quantity time, out of that you will have quality.
You will get quality, yeah.
It's the same thing with when we were doing that writing exercise where we were writing 3 pages every day, because you write that much.
Yeah.
Eventually you're going to get some good stuff out of it.
Well, not only that too, but yeah, exactly. Because by doing it in a repetitive way, fashion like that, doing it over and over again, you develop kind of different practices and tools that you use that you end up getting really good content actually over time. And it starts to be valuable. And I think habits are a great way to look at it, because everything we do really is a habit. I mean, you look at our routines, you look at the structure of our day, we do things at certain times. Most of us are used to getting up and going to bed at a certain time.
Most people go to the same 7 or 8 places their whole entire life.
Yeah, right.
That's how they catch like serial killers and stuff like that, because once they have to leave their home, they just look for the other places that they normally go to and they catch them there.
Yeah, because most of us have a routine. I mean, we don't do that much different. I mean, it's funny, but I think even our podcast was really built out of a habit. We were meeting every week, and it was a perfect way to do it.
Yeah.
And it kind of benefited us both ways, because we also have a reason to meet too.
Yeah.
So it keeps it going.
Yeah.
I think incorporating stuff into your day like that is so crucial. I mean, it really does help. And once it becomes part of your day, it's easy to continue. Mm-hmm. And I think people, you gotta not let yourself get frustrated early on, because it is difficult. And you will have, days that you don't stick to it, or days that you mess up. But as long as you do stick with it over a long period of time, it does become part of your day, and then it's easy.
Yeah, that's a great point that you pointed out, because here's the thing: you're going to fail at your habit. Like, that's just the way it is. There are some days that you're not going to do it. You're going to fall off the horse, but you have to get back on the horse, and you have to start doing it again. Like, let's say you're trying to diet and you're trying to not eat carbohydrates or something like that. Okay, you're going to do well for a few days, for a week, and then you're going to fall off the horse. Yeah. And then, but here's the thing: once you fall off the horse, that's almost guaranteed to happen. At that point, you have to decide, you have to choose what's your response to that. Do you just be like, oh, I'm a failure, I failed before, I'm going to keep on failing, it was destined to happen, and you just stay off the horse? Or do you say, hey, that was bound to happen, I know what to do now, I get back on the horse and start again, let's see if I can do better than last time?
Yeah, and to that point too, I think, it's important to make these practices that you want to incorporate into your day achievable at the outset. Like, I heard somebody, I forget who it was, but it was she was a fitness coach, and she made a really great point. She's like, if you want to start exercising and you never exercised before, like say doing yoga, she's like, instead of saying, I'm going to sit down every day and do an hour of yoga, because then you're watching the clock, just sit on the mat, right? Just get out your stuff and get changed, because then you're already more likely to do it. You're already wearing the stuff, you're already ready to go, but you're not giving yourself a task that's sort of, forcing you to watch the clock, making it, difficult to where you're going to fail a lot, and it keeps you coming back. I think that's important.
Yeah, it's a perspective of time, because everybody wants those things now. Like, we want the ideal body now. And that's why we get the gym membership, because we see the guy with the washboard abs, and we say, I want that, I'm going to get the gym membership, and by next week I'll have those. But it just doesn't happen that way. It took 5-10 years for you to get the pot belly. It's going to take a little bit of time to get rid of that.
Yeah.
And But having that perspective of time, knowing that if you put in the work now, you are guaranteed to have that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's the worst too, especially with like you mentioned, like seeing that people that are like super in shape. We watch all these shows and movies and stuff, and like it's easy to forget that those actors, that's part of their job, is to be in shape, for these roles and stuff, and to look a certain way. So like they're spending a significant amount of time every day with trainers,
they don't have
like,
to go work somewhere 8 hours a day sitting down. They have a nutritionist, they have a personal chef, they have a gym in their house, they also have a personal trainer at their gym that they go to.
And a lot of times that's built into the job because they need to look that way for a movie or something, and we don't see all that.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think with this too, with habits, I think also trying new things is really important. Because just the idea of trying things, I find that helps me a lot. Also with the belief that I can accomplish things is kind of expanding my horizons. Learning new things and trying new things, always sort of testing out what I want to do or what I can do, both to learn sort of what I'm interested in, but it also helps me generate ideas, and it helps me sort of stay fresh in a way.
Weren't we talking about this in another episode, like the explore, exploit conundrum?
Yes, we were, yeah.
How, like, basically to kind of have some happiness and fulfillment in your life, you have to go between exploring and exploiting the things that you found. And so that's definitely a very good thing to do, is try some new stuff, figure out if you can become good at it.
Yeah, every new skill, every new thing we do is something that we can leverage later. Right? And it's a new thing, and it's something we know now, right? We actually have experience with it instead of just, sort of an unfounded, belief or an unfounded evaluation.
Yeah. So I'd like to kind of take a more practical look at this.
Okay. Let's do it.
Because, like I said, I like to start things, and when I start things, there are certain things that I do in order to get started. Because I think that otherwise, I'm just not going to. I'm not even.
You want to go through 2 examples then?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do when you do them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Because I won't even start something if I know I don't have the time or the commitment to it. I've gotten to that point where it's a waste of my time to even try something if I know I'm not going to be able to put in the effort and to complete it.
Oh, that's and that is a good point, I think. Well, especially now that you know what you're doing, you already have projects going. You're not starting from scratch essentially.
Yeah.
I guess when I said trying things out too, I also meant like when I'm doing stuff, sometimes I'll try new things, like different ideas. Like for instance, like writing a blog, I'll try different styles of articles or something like that, just to keep myself fresh. It helps, I think, learning what you're capable of, and it keeps you kind of creative.
Yeah. So generally when I start something, and what I like to do is I like to first figure out where I am in terms of my skills, and then figure out where I want to be. And it's not just like a lot of people have these goals that are just very non-specific.
Yeah.
Like they're like, I wanna learn to speak a language, and like, what does that mean to you? Because I can speak a few words in a lot of languages, but then if I actually want to be fluent and have a conversation, that's going to be a bit more difficult. So, I really think that in order to get your way to a goal, you have to have a clearly defined goal.
No, that is crucial. I think it is absolutely one of the most important steps, is learning how to actually define your goals, creating clear goals, so you have a way to assess your progress. Because otherwise it's just vague and arbitrary.
Yeah.
And that will lead to failure.
Yep. Yeah, and then so once I know where I am and know where I want to go, I kind of have a direction and a line. Then it's helpful to have waypoints along the way, because it's not going to be like overnight I'm going to get there. There's going to be a whole bunch of different things in between where I am and where I want to go. So for instance, when I started the YouTube channel, I was like, okay, once I do this for a month, then I'll reward myself with this. Once I do it for 2 months, I'll reward myself with this. Once I do it for 100 days consecutively, I'll reward myself with this. So that way I had waypoints and I had incentives to get there.
Yeah, what's nice is you set yourself a task that you could achieve, because you broke it down by day, really, right? A video a day, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And it was nice that you by doing that, you gave yourself a point of evaluation. This month, I've accomplished this goal. Now I get some reward. I see that I've done it. I can do it. Now I move forward and I keep going, right? And it makes it easier to do.
Yep. And then just kind of understanding that you're going to have times when you don't want to do it. You're going to have difficulties that you didn't see coming. And those are all part of the path. But if you stick with it and stick through it, like I'm learning this with computer programming right now, I'll get to points where I'm like, there's no way I could understand this. There's no way I'll ever understand this. Like I just see stuff and it just doesn't make sense. But I have this philosophy that if I just keep at it, eventually I'll get it. And it's crazy because I just keep at it and I keep doing it and I keep going, and then eventually I look back a week or two later and it's simple.
Well, it's funny, but it's so true, right? Because it happens to all of us. But a lot of people, and I know this, I mean, it happens to everybody. When that frustration happens, we abandon it because we convince ourselves that we can't do it. When in reality, all we needed was more time.
Yeah.
Because, like computer programming is actually a good example. Because, you're progressing through sort of a level of difficulty. And, you kind of hit plateaus. And then there's sort of these large jumps to the next level.
Yep.
And, when you hit that next part where you're trying to get to that next plateau, a lot of times it gets really complicated. And, that's where people jump off, right? Because they say, there's no way I can make it to that next level. And I think that's one of the biggest faults we have, is that we convince ourselves we're incapable of doing something when really all we need is time.
Yeah. And also with these difficulties, I found that a very useful technique is when I can't go deeper, I go wider. So like, for instance, when I come up to these difficulties in like videos that I'm watching, and I just don't understand it, I pause there, but then I go wider and I start looking at books that I have or YouTube videos or something different, and I kind of expand it, and then when I come back to that video series, it's easier.
That's a great example too. I remember this from undergrad actually, when I first started studying philosophy. A lot of philosophers can be very dense and convoluted.
No.
Big surprise, right?
No.
Yeah, and I remember one of my professors said something great. He said, he's like, look, if you're struggling with the material after we talk about it in class, he's like, remember that there's other ways to possibly explain this. He's like, go outside of my lectures. Look for, introductions to this stuff online, or, look for videos. He's like, because somebody might say it in such a way that it clicks. And just for whatever reason, the way I happen to explain it is not necessarily clicking. Or it might just be that you need a couple different perspectives to see the broader sort of truth, right, behind it. And I think that is very helpful because it also motivates us to keep going rather than abandoning a project, right? You explore more options and more possibilities in the same area. Yeah.
So what do you do when you have to start some stuff?
When I have to start some stuff, it's funny because, like, I think I was struggling with this a lot actually not that long ago. And, part of it I think too is like that fear that's in the way is a big block to us, right? And trying to overcome that can be hard. So I found what worked for me first was when I was trying to start, I'll use the blog as an example, I did research first. Because I found that in doing some research and researching what other people were doing, it became a more realizable goal for me. Because at first, I thought of it and you think of this like finished product, and that's really time consuming, right? There's a lot of work that goes into it. You're setting up everything, you're creating all this stuff, and it seems almost overwhelming, right? Because you look at sites that have thousands of articles, and so it's a lot of information. It's a lot of words at the end of the day. And it seems like it's an impossible goal. So I did research first. I gave myself a few weeks to research how to set it up. I researched, other people's work. And it really made everything a lot easier to understand. And then what I did was I planned a step-by-step. So I broke this larger goal down into very easy steps that I could accomplish. And I think I had spoken to you at the time too. So I used your method of setting waypoints basically with some sort of reward. And I found that very helpful. But my biggest block at the time was that fear of, basically the unknown and of failure. And I think, the researching very carefully allowed me to both see that it was possible, and I knew that I could accomplish it. I had the skills requisite for it, or I could learn anything that I needed to learn. And it gave me time also to kind of like prepare the plan that I wanted to use to move forward. And I think that's important. Almost everything we do can be broken down into baby steps. I mean, a book, you can break it down to, a word or a sentence at a time. You can break down computer programming to, a line at a time, right, of code. I mean, you can literally break everything down to manageable parts. You can break down a 25-mile hike to, one step at a time if you have to. And it makes it easier to achieve because I think when we make our intermediary goals something that we can accomplish, it keeps our motivation up, especially when we're starting out.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because I remember very clearly that fear that was stopping you. Like, I remember we had a conversation and you're like, I'm going to start. And then a week later, we were talking again and you hadn't started. And
yeah.
it was very clear that this fear was stopping you. And I think that's where a lot of people probably are right now in addressing their goals. So kind of from where you are now, knowing that you've already passed that fear, looking back on it, what does it seem like? Because at that time it seems so enormous.
Well, it's crazy, right? And I think that's what's funny is like these fears of the unknown, and I think these fears that block us are often, they're so imagined and fabricated that once you get beyond them, you almost don't understand what it was, right? No, I'm serious. It's crazy. And in all honesty, like, and it helped me because one, so a couple things that really helped me, and maybe this would help other people too, right? Is that I mentioned this to you, and I mentioned this to a couple people in my life that I'm close to. So I had already I set myself up so that others knew I was going to do this, really to keep myself motivated. It was a tool, right, to motivate myself, and that way I could keep voicing it out loud that I'm going to start. And as I was getting sort of frustrated by the fear, I kept doing more research, and that helped me sort of mitigate that fear a little bit. You know, Epicurus said, you know, that we fear what we don't understand. When we understand something, it becomes known to us, we no longer fear it. And that makes perfect sense, right? So the more I researched, you know, what needed to be done, the more sort of practical and easy it became to accomplish. But the fear is interesting because it really does, it cripples you. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. You go from you can go from an idea and this sort of exuberance at getting started to being completely crushed and overwhelmed. And, you know, I don't know that there's an easy way to get by that for everyone, because I think a lot of us do struggle with it. And if you are in a position where you're struggling to start in general, I think that fear is very overwhelming because you just don't know what the other side looks like. But I think something that also is important to remind yourself is the other side's always better. It is always better to start something and even fail than not do anything at all. And I think I reminded myself of that again and again, because I think talking to you helped a lot too, because you have these projects that you started, and I've seen you, you know, succeed and fail on different ones or abandon different ones for various reasons. And so that was useful because I knew you were doing it, I could do it. And that helped me kind of keep motivated, you know, throughout. But the fear is very strange. It really is.
Yeah. I like how you said that you stuck with the fear. Because a lot of people will meet this fear and then run away from it. And just you know, it took a week or two where you were just with the fear and researching and finding out more information, but you actually stuck with it, which is something that a lot of people won't do. And that alone, like, oftentimes the more time you spend with the fear, the smaller and smaller it becomes.
Well, that's just it, right? The more familiar you get with the thing, the less scary it becomes, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, these things that you imagine happening, they stop seeming so realistic, I guess is one way to maybe put it. But it was funny, because it's true, right? I had mentioned it to you, like I think I said to you, like I'm going to start this week, and it ended up being like 3 weeks later that I actually started it. Mm-hmm. But I just stuck with it the whole time, and it sucked. I mean, it does suck dealing with that, but I knew that if I did that, I would overcome that fear, and that's, you know, and once you start something, that's the great part, is once you start it, I think it makes starting anything else easier.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you've been in a situation where you haven't started something for a while, or you're kind of like unsure of where you want to go. You know, and that was a big part of my problem too, is I was very unsure and wavering. And, you know, once you begin something, you feel more direction, more purpose, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think a big part of human life is having projects. We're creative beings, right? We like solving problems. We like making things. You know, I mean, it's great.
Well, we were just looking. I sent you this thing about, you know, the 4 tenets of mental health, and nothing in there was about happiness. But one of the things was about progressively realizing a worthwhile ideal or worthwhile goal.
Yeah, it's meaning, right?
Yeah.
It's having meaning in life.
Yeah, and that's so important, because when you lose that meaning, life kind of loses its luster.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When you have nothing that you're working towards, I think it does. Everything kind of loses value, because there's no what do they call that? There's no horse in the race, right, for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's nothing in this that really like is pulling you in.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, philosophers have talked about, you know, the meaning of life, I mean, countless times, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I've always loved the existentialists, because, you know, it's about finding your own meaning, and I think it's really about those projects that we set ourselves.
Yeah.
The project of self-creation, the project of making ourselves in the world, because in doing that, we really are making a meaningful life, right? And we're finding ways to make meaning in the world that can be shared with others and everything, and I think that's great. But it really gives us purpose and direction that we otherwise don't have.
Yeah. one of the big mistakes that I always confront is there's this mental illusion that I have that there's an end. There's an end goal. Like, as soon as I get here, then I'll be happy. As soon as I get this, then everything will work out. As soon as I get there or do this, then everything will be perfect. There's this, and it comes up all the time.
Oh, we talked about it tons. Yeah,
it's like a flawed mental model, but it's one that I confront on a regular basis. And I heard it said by, I think it was potentially one of these Navy SEALs, how life doesn't have end goals.
Mm-hmm.
It has waypoints. So like, you can it's like if you've ever climbed high mountains, like oftentimes you can see what looks like the peak, but then you get there and you realize that's not the peak. That's
you have more to go.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like that, how life will give you waypoints, and basically like each of these goals that I think is the end, like as soon as I get there, I think that's the end. That's only a waypoint. Because I get there and then I have to reassess life and figure out where to go from there.
It's funny that we do think that way. I mean, lots of people struggle with that too. I mean, that you mentioned this, it's funny because I think I ran into so many people that have made that claim to me, right? Like, oh, once I, get to this point, I'll be happy, or I'll be, I've heard my friends say it that are young, they're saying, oh, once I make enough money, I'll retire. And it's like, well, that's kind of a weird goal to set yourself, A.
Yep.
And B, it's like, if you haven't worked on yourself, how are you going to be happy? You're just trying to accomplish some task. You're kind of, it's like almost like a misassociation. Mm-hmm. And I've always wondered where that comes from. Because I remember this even back in school, right? When you're younger, you kind of, your semester, you see like, I have a paper due, I have a final, so forth and so on. And you treat all of those as like an end when they're not. They're just one thing along the way, right? Yeah. It's a weird...
Well, it's kind of the idea of wanting. A lot of people think that we want these things, and then as soon as we get them, that want is fulfilled. But actually, another way of looking at it is that once you get that thing, the wanting goes away. And then you feel a bit of peace when the wanting goes away.
A brief sort of moment of
Yeah. And so instead of fulfilling your wants, because that's just playing with desire and there will always be more desires.
And that's dangerous game, yeah.
Yeah, instead of fulfilling your wants, instead work on letting go of your wants. Because once the want goes away, then you feel fulfilled.
And you can let go of them. It's totally possible.
Yeah.
I think that's why also having projects is so crucial, right? Because it's not simply a want. It's also essentially a way of life, right? It's developing habits. It's developing new skills. It's learning something. It's building yourself over time rather than just a goal or an end or anything like that. And I think, maybe we should mention that too, with starting something, I think it's crucial too not to look at these, the end goal as sort of the goal, essentially.
Because you never know.
Yeah.
The thing is, you never know. Like, I bet if you were to ask Einstein or Elon Musk or Justin Bieber, if any of them, when they started, knew they were going to be as big a success as they were, I doubt that any of them would say yes. Like, probably one of the most successful projects I've ever done was starting my YouTube channel, and I just did it because I thought it would be fun.
And that's a great reason, though. That's the best reason to start something.
And I wanted to see if I could do it. Like, that was why I started. I thought it would be fun, and I wanted to see if I could do it.
And but just to stop there, I think that's a really good way to look at that, because instead of setting yourself a goal of like, I'm going to get 1,000 or 10,000 followers or whatever, right? Or reach, make $1 million or something like that. Instead, you did it for your own reasons that were internal. And so those are always the best. Because, one, they're things you can accomplish. They depend on you, not the external world. And by doing that, you sort of set yourself up for success and for sticking with it over time.
And it's just fulfilling. Like, this podcast that we do here, this is something that I just want to do. It's like fulfilling.
I love it. Yeah.
And like, the crazy thing is that even though we may be benefiting you guys, we're both benefiting so much from it. Because it's by stating these things and sharing these things, and even we listen to this podcast afterwards, and it's just getting that much from it. And I've started another YouTube channel, and it's doing it not for the money, but doing it for fulfillment, and doing it because I realize that it is a way to serve.
Yeah, and I think if you do things that way, you will have success over time, because you're always learning things from all of these projects, from all of these, these tasks that you're involved in. But the other thing is you're also getting a value that's more important than money, right? You're getting fulfillment, which is crucial to life.
Yeah.
And I think, too often we look at goals and starting something as these large end goals that we need to achieve. Like even like losing weight, we look at it not to get healthy, but to drop 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Or, you know, we wanna make money, but we're not really thinking about, well, what's gonna make us happy? We're thinking about how can we make $1 million or something.
Yeah, so that other people will approve of us.
Yeah, and that's all flawed thinking, right? Because
Yeah.
we're looking outside of ourselves for validation. Whereas if we do things because we actually want to, they will have meaning and they will be valuable and we will get more out of it.
Totally. There's so many problems with doing things for other people's approval.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you never become yourself or realize yourself. You're always making yourself conditional on what others think.
And here's the thing is that, you know, not everybody's not going to like you. No matter what you do.
Yeah.
Half the people aren't going to like what you're doing. So doing things for other people's approval, you're never going to get it.
Oh, and actually, you know what? That's a good point. You know, with the fear of starting, I think that is a big block, right? Is people are afraid what other people will think.
Yeah.
They're afraid, you know, of either approval or looking stupid. And, you know, the fact is, I know that is a big hurdle to get over. I do realize that. I don't want to make it seem like it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Because we imagine these things and make them so much worse for ourselves.
Yeah.
But the truth is, I think if you start something that you really want to do, the people that are close to you will appreciate it. And they'll see what you're doing and see that you find it valuable, even if they don't understand it. And I think you also have to be willing to stand on your own and be responsible for yourself, right? Otherwise, I mean, it's not going to work.
Yeah, totally. So another thing that I was thinking about that's very helpful with starting things, and this is crucial. Like this is so understated and it's so simple. This is like the most simple thing and the most understated thing, and people don't actually realize the power that this has. And all of you are like, "What is this thing? I need
What
to
is
know.
it?
It's so easy. Tell me." It's simple. It's writing it down.
Yeah.
Like, it's the simplest thing ever. Find a pen, find a pencil, find a piece of paper, and write down your goals. You're over 42% more likely to accomplish them if you write them down.
Well, no, and exactly. When we were talking about the fear I was dealing with and sticking with it, part of it was because one, I had written it down, and two, like I said, I had mentioned it to you and somebody else I'm close with. So I had put it out in the world already, right? And you are more likely to accomplish something. It's amazing how writing down actually has this huge impact. It's such a simple thing, right? You carry a notebook, you write down something, and you know, but it's there. You've committed to it in a way just simply by stating it on paper.
Yeah. I'm listening to this thing called Goals by Brian Tracy. It's all about your goals, but he mentioned something in there, how write down 100 goals. And once you do that, your life will change in ways that you can't even expect. So that's something that I'm doing this weekend, is writing down 100 goals. Because I've never written down that many. I've written down 10, 15, something like that. But 100 goals is...
Well, that's also something cool too, right? Just in trying new things. You've never done that. You've written down goals before, you've never done that. So try it, you know? Because one, you never know what we'll come up with.
Yeah.
Because 100's a large number.
It definitely
you know?
is, yeah.
And I think what's funny too is when maybe... thinking about it in terms of 100 too, you're probably more likely to break those goals down into smaller bits. And I think that'll be an interesting project to see what happens.
Ooh, yeah, and something that he said in the beginning of this series, and I'm going to try and remember it now on the fly, but it's like 3 steps that will almost guarantee the success of your life. 1 is figure out what your goals are. 2 is break them down into small steps. And 3 is work on those goals every day.
Oh, you have to, yeah.
Yeah. You do that, you're guaranteed to accomplish them. You're guaranteed to have this amazing life.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot too, of the breaking them down into those incremental steps. And you know, it's funny, like when I was doing research a while back, you know, I was looking at authors. I just happened to, because I like writing and I like reading a lot. And there are so many interviews with authors where they say, you know, like they struggled with their first book because they were thinking about completing a book. Like the whole story, instead of, you know, a chapter, or instead of, you know,
200
pages a day, whatever,
page a day.
And they said once they broke it down into smaller increments, it became manageable, and they actually achieved it a lot faster. And you know, it's funny. I remember doing my thesis in college. I had that same advice given to me by an advisor. He said, you know, look, don't think of the end project because it's likely to change throughout, right? He's like, instead, write a paper for each chapter. Look at it that way. You've written papers before. It's not hard, so each chapter's a paper. Do it that way, and before you know it, you'll have the thing done.
That's really
and it made
good.
it a lot easier.
Yeah, that's really good breaking it down like that.
And I think the important thing with that is knowing what you're capable of and making those goals manageable. That's really the important thing.
And I would even go further to say that make them so easy that you can't not do them.
Yeah.
There's this book by Stephen something or other on procrastination.
Good.
I'll remember. Yeah. But basically, it's like the art, how to I don't know.
Is it the art of procrastination?
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's something along those lines. Blue cover. But basically, he says make your goals so small that you can't not complete them. Like when he had a goal of becoming fit, like getting in shape, it was 1 push-up. That was all he had to do each day was 1 push-up.
Oh, I like that.
And it's just finding something so small. Like if you want to write a book, okay, make it that you write 1 sentence a day.
Yeah.
And that's your minimum. And you may laugh, because you're like 1 sentence a day. I mean, come on, that's super simple. Yeah, it's supposed to be that small where it's laughable because it's something that you have no reason not to do.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, right? When we have goals, we stress about it every day. We stress about our to-do list. And when things are unmanageable, all we do is stress instead of accomplishing anything. But when you make them stupidly easy, like write 1 sentence, well, 1, you've already accomplished that task. So you're technically done. Everything else is bonus, and you're more likely to sit there and just write.
Yeah.
Or you're more likely to exercise for an hour because you did your 1 push-up already, you're done.
Yeah,
the stress is gone.
You're always welcome to do more, but at the minimum you do 1. And even if you had the most exhausting day ever and you're like in bed and then you remember, oh, I have to write a sentence, you can get up and write a sentence and
you
go
can
back
do
to
1
bed.
push-up. Yeah, exactly. Well, this is funny. I think this actually really highlights the important part of learning to really control our thinking and attitude. Because it's all about, what we imagine, the stress that we put on ourselves about our to-do list essentially each day, and instead of accomplishing anything, just stressing about it, has to do with not thinking about it the right way.
Yeah.
We can break it down into manageable tasks.
This is the reason for the failure of all these New Year's resolutions.
Exactly,
Because
yeah.
the New Year's resolutions are, I'm going to go to the gym for 2 hours every day. I'm going to have a washboard ab. It's not like I'm going to do 1 push-up a day. I'm going to write a sentence a day.
Yeah. And because what's funny, those type of New Year's resolutions, they don't take into account the time it actually takes to accomplish something.
Yeah.
And the effort involved, right? It's funny, but like a 6-pack takes a long time. It also requires a significant diet change. I mean, it's hard. It is not an easy thing to accomplish.
I had one for about a month in my life, and it was
same here.
Yeah, and then I had 1 beer and it disappeared.
Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous, right? It's hard to accomplish, and if you think if that's your goal, you're gonna fail because it's gonna be frustrating as hell, and even if you last a long time, you're gonna get to a point where you're gonna be like, I don't want to do this anymore. Whereas if you make it a push-up, well, you always succeed. Mm-hmm. And I think that's crucial. It's the stress. We imagine this stress. We imagine this. We make it so much worse, and we can make it manageable. Why don't we?
Yeah. Who knows? So let's see. There was something else that I wanted to touch on about writing down your goals or something like that, but I forgot it. So
we talked about writing down your goals,
Yeah.
100. It's interesting. I think a lot of this too. It really is. It's we have to learn about ourselves. I think that is a big part, and it's not easy, but we need to learn what we want, what we value, what will be fulfilling for us. So sometimes I think starting something also might. If you're struggling to start something, I would also recommend writing things down like your goals, because I think that does also help you get a sense of what you really want. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at it, if you try to start the wrong thing, essentially, you probably won't succeed.
Yeah. Early on in life, I think you have to have the wrong goals.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't until I had achieved all of my wrong goals that I started setting good goals.
Yeah.
Like I went to college, and then I went to vet school because that was what my parents wanted for me.
We do all these things that we think we're supposed to do, right? That other people, the pressure they put on us, the expectations they put on us, and you're not living for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was on the verge of getting married to someone I really didn't want to get married to, because that's what my parents wanted, and that's what society said was normal. And it's like doing all of these things, I think you kind of have to do them. Like, that's the thing about making mistakes and about failing. Like, here's another thing. On that list of 4 things for mental health, one of them is good judgment.
Yeah.
And good judgment comes from bad judgment.
It does,
It comes from experience. And so one of the most important things that you can do in your life is make mistakes and fail and learn from them.
And when you make those mistakes, keep trying, because you learn that they're not a permanent roadblock.
Yeah.
You know, you can overcome any failure. You can overcome anything really in the way if you keep at it. And I think that's important too, right? You know, that like you might try and start something and you find out it doesn't work out, but there might be another way to do it if you stick to it, right? And I think that's important.
Yeah.
And it's about learning these things.
Yeah. So in terms of having habits, like, because New Year's is coming up and everybody's going to be wanting to set new habits. You're going to have to. Everybody's going to be asking about it in the office. I would challenge you for 2021 to set the smallest goal you possibly could. And Jerry Seinfeld has a very good method for making sure that you maintain that goal. He says take your calendar and every day that you do it, put a big fat red X. And then after a week, you're going to have a whole string of X's. And after a month, you're going to have a whole bunch more X's. And then you're going to get to a point where you don't want to break those X's.
Yeah, you get in that habit, right?
Yeah.
You've developed that habit.
Yeah. But I would challenge all the listeners out here, instead of setting some big audacious goal, have the smallest manageable goal you could have in the direction of what you want. And then do it every day.
That's what's important, right? Think about those large goals you have now and ask yourself, what's a goal that gets me in the right direction? That gets me on the path? Because really the thing is, if you're struggling to start, you're in the woods and you can't see the trail. You don't want to get out of the woods yet. You need to find the trail first, right? So figure out what will help you find that trail. What little task will get you on course? And then once you habituate that, before you know it, you'll be on your way to accomplishing the larger task.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, how to get started with anything.
How to get started with something.
With
anything.
Something, not anything.
One of those things.
Something or anything. Yeah, I think, here's the thing. You just do it.
Yeah, right?
How do you do it? You just do it. But what about, you just do it. I remember this. There was this, from back when I was first figuring out how to get started doing stuff. There was this guy who was teaching SEO, and this was like way back, a long time ago. And he would have these live streams, and everybody would be asking, but what about this? But what about that? But what about this? But what about that? And he's like, guys, stop coming up with like these artificial things that haven't happened yet. Just get started, and then you'll figure it out.
Well, that's the truth, right? You know, we always forget this too. If we just start, we will work it out. We will figure it out. And I think that's what's the worst part is so many of us, like you said, your friend that has all these ideas, but he doesn't do anything with them. He doesn't start. The idea itself, anybody can have.
Yeah.
It's starting that's important. Being active and intentional in the fucking world, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just sitting around. I mean, and you know, I always think of this to myself too. If I do nothing, nothing will happen.
That's guaranteed.
Yep. If I do something, anything's possible.
Who knows?
Yeah. So as long as I do something, I'm doing better than I was doing nothing.
Exactly.
And I think that's probably the easiest way to think about this.
That's the perfect way to end it.
Yeah, right there, baby.
And that's how you end something.
That's how it goes.
Well, that was a lot of fun this time, Danny.
Yeah, it was awesome. So,
I learned
you know,
a lot.
I did too. You know, please like, subscribe, or whatever.
Click
you
the
do.
notification bell, whatever else you can do on podcasts.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. And, you know, this is episode 14. We'll be back next week.
Yeah, we'll see you next week. Have a great New Year.
Yeah, you too. Later, Andy.
All right.